Hello, this is Josiah Winslow recording for his Programming in Java course at MATC for Instructor Mark Cribb. Now, I did my last few assignments early because I thought if I needed extra time for the next assignment, I would have a large window of time in order to do that. It turns out I needed it because it is currently very close to midnight on November 2nd, and midnight on November 2nd is when my assignment is due. So I don't have a lot of time to waste. Let's just get down to it. So here I have the challenges, which, by the way, all of them were linked this time. Each of them were extensions of this one employee class that we had to write. And first I'm going to demonstrate all of the code that I wrote at the sort of, I guess you would call it, back end of this, and then I will demonstrate the unit tests, which are on the front end. So here we have the basic employee class. It's got a field for name, employee number, which it's actually 3 numbers with a dash and then a letter, and then a hire date, which I decided to represent as a calendar. Because date, there is a date type, but the constructor, which allows me to set the year, month, and day separately of the date, has been deprecated. It is basically at this point just a wrapper for the milliseconds that have passed since the epoch, January 1st, 1970. So I decided to use calendar for storing the dates because they allow me to set the fields separately. And each of these fields are protected because I needed the subclasses to still be able to access them. Otherwise, I would have just made them private. So here we have a basic constructor, getters and setters, and a toString method, which I decided to add for my convenience sake. This right here is a custom exception. I throw a custom exception called invalid employee number, which, if we look up here, it's a simple class that extends exception. And if given no arguments, then it just throws the message invalid employee number. Otherwise, it does invalid employee number, and it includes the actual invalid number so that we can see it. That's what I call here if it doesn't match this regex, which this regex is basically, it will return true if the string matches 3 digits, then a dash, then a random, not random, just any letter from A to Z, capitalized. So if it doesn't match, I throw the exception. And we also had to extend off of that for production worker. Production worker extends employee. It has all the fields the employee did, plus an int called shift and a double called hourly rate. Here's a constructor that takes all of those. Here's a constructor that takes only the stuff that employee takes. And here are some getters and setters for the new fields. Now, this also is a custom exception. Very simple, just like the last one. It just says invalid shift. And there's also one for invalid pay rate. Both of these are right here. And we throw these if the shift or the hourly rate is invalid. Now, in the case of shift, for production worker, there are 2 kinds of shifts: day shifts and night shifts, and we represent those with the integers 1 and 2. That's probably not how I would have done it. I maybe would have used an enum, but this is how the assignment requirements say for me to do it, so that's how I'm doing it. So if the shift is not equal to either 1 or 2, we throw the invalid shift error. And if the hourly rate is negative, Then we throw the invalid pay rate error. And then finally we also have another toString that shows that. Here for shift supervisor, that also extends off an employee. It has annual salary and annual bonus. Constructors, getters and setters, this time without validation because I don't have to. And then a toString. And finally, as far as classes, we go with team leader. Team leader extends off of production worker, which itself extends off of employee. So it has everything production worker did, plus these fields. Double for monthly bonus, an int for required training hours, and an int for attended training hours. Now, the requirements were ambiguous as to what data type I should be using for this, so I decided to use an int. Here's a constructor that takes all of those. Here's a constructor that takes only what production worker took. And here's a constructor that takes only what employee took. Here's some simple getters and setters. And toString. Now we get to the unit tests. I'm not very creative, and it just told me to use these classes in programs. So I just decided to make a program that all it does is it creates one of these objects and then prints it. And this is, by the way, why I created the toString methods on each of them. I don't think I had to. Yeah, no, I didn't have to. But I decided to do it because it is very convenient to type out something like system.out.println Leon Hall. So here we have an employee called Leon Hall. Now this is how I had to represent the hire date, because in order to actually have like a date and in order for me to actually have a calendar date, I would need to create an instance of calendar, which you don't do with new calendar because calendar is an abstract class. So you have to do it with calendar.getInstance, and then you have to call set on that calendar instance to set its attributes, and then you have to pass it as an argument to this production worker constructor. I decided to use a Gregorian calendar class, which is a subclass of calendar, which allows me to have this one-liner constructor right here, and then I casted that to calendar. Now, why did I do all of this instead of making the data type for the date Gregorian calendar in the first place? I don't know. But in any case, if we run this first challenge, we will get all the information for Leon Hall. His employee number is 489J. He was hired on January 12th, 2021. He works the night shift for $15.50 an hour. And then next, we have a shift supervisor. Now, I decided to, for this constructor, I decided to give it only the information that employee takes, and then the stuff that's specific to shift supervisor, I set with the setters for shift supervisor separately. So let's go ahead and print this. And here we have the info for Richard Abar. Employee number 922-C. Hired on February 9th, 2021. Makes $35,000 a year and has an annual bonus of $1,500. Now for demonstrating team leader. Here we have Marilyn Thorne. Her employee number is 225-X. She was hired on April 16, 2021 and works the day shift. Makes $12.40 an hour with a monthly bonus of $1,200. She is required to take 40 hours of training, and she has attended 56 hours of training. And finally, we have to demonstrate each of the exceptions. So, Right up here, we attempt to make an object called Richard Lewis, which is a shift supervisor, and we attempt to give it this, which is an invalid employee number. So it'll raise the exception of invalid employee number, which we catch right here. Now, NetBeans yells at me because I'm using a generic exception catcher for this, and it wants me to catch invalid employee number itself. And down here as well, it wants me to catch multiple sorts of things. But I just decided to go with catch exception because I'm very lazy. So here we have invalid employee number will be thrown from there. And here we have an object called Adam Allen, which is given an invalid shift. That's 3. It only takes 1 or 2 as a shift, so that'll give an invalid shift. And then finally, we construct a team leader called David Shaw, who is given a negative pay rate. That's an invalid pay rate, so it'll throw the exception of invalid pay rate. So let's go ahead and run this. There we go. Invalid employee number for the first one, invalid shift for the second one, and invalid pay rate for the third one. Alright, and I believe that is everything that I needed for that assignment. There we are. So I wish you a good day, Mr. Cribb, and yeah, take care.